In that moment, I called out to God. I was broken. I had no clue what to do with my life. I was directionless. I was depressed. My laundry pile was that high in the middle of the room, and no direction in life. I'm making bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. And for some reason, in that moment, I called out to God. And for the first time, I heard him speak a word to me. Just one word. One word was all it was. He said, "Pastor." And I said, "No way. Absolutely not." I think oftentimes we want to hear God's voice and we want to hear God give us direction and tell us what to do. Anybody ever been there? You want God to just speak to you and tell you what to do? And then we look back at the Bible stories and they don't listen to what God tells them to do. And we think, how in the world, if God spoke to me, I'd do it? Yeah, no, we wouldn't. At least I wouldn't. God said, "Pastor," and I said, "No way. That's absolutely crazy. I'm making this up." My uncle was studying to be a pastor. He graduated from seminary, was on his way to proposed to his fiancée, and got run over by a drunk semi-truck driver. And so I started playing this in my mind as an excuse. Everybody in my family said, "You sound like Dwayne, you look like Dwayne, you're everything about you is like Dwayne, you're taking his place in the family." I said, "No, this is just my mind playing tricks on me because everybody thinks I'm like Uncle Dwayne." And so I pulled a Jonah and I started running. And I ran with a little help. I was actually at Walla Walla just before I got kicked out of Walla Walla that God spoke that word to me. And I ran from Walla Walla to Southern, back to community college, and finally ended up at Union, all the way along, God speaking to my mind, "Pastor," every time I asked him what I should do. Biomedical engineering, I'll do that. Pre-med, I'll go there. Pastoring, I'm scared to death to get in front of people. It terrified me. I was vice president of my 8th grade class, and no way did I want to get up in front of anybody and speak. When I actually finally accepted God's call and started, I remember my girlfriend at the time had brought her sister to hear one of my first sermons. She says, "Please don't put my sister through that ever again." She was a little nicer than that, but that's the gist. And so I ran and I ran and I ran, and I blamed every single other entity or person in my life that I could, never taking responsibility myself. Got kicked out of Walla Walla. Walla Walla was an awful college, awful place to go. It was their fault. And blamed everyone else. I'll never forget the moment. I was over at my old youth director's place, and we were over at his house, the one who had taken us out camping and rafting and tubing and done all these events with us. And I was at his house and I was complaining about the teachers and the professors, or the teachers and the administration, and complaining about my dad and everybody else, putting the blame on everybody else. By the way, when you blame others and you make yourself a victim, you are powerless. The only way to truly gain freedom and be able to make a difference or a change in your life is to take responsibility yourself. And he looked at me and he said, "It's about time you grow up and stop blaming everybody else for your bad decisions." Now, I want to be careful here. You don't just go up to someone and say that who's making bad decisions. He had poured himself into my life year after year after year after year, and I knew the man loved me and cared about me, and he would sacrifice himself for me. He had earned the right to speak into my life. And for the first time in years, I stopped and I actually listened to someone else. For the first time in years, I thought to myself, well, you know what, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I need to make some changes. Life didn't change overnight. But finally, I ended up at Union College. And as I was going to the cafeteria, I began to notice there, checking us out in the cafeteria line, was this girl. She kind of caught my eye, and then I noticed she was also working desk in the guy's dorm. And so I started hanging out there in the guy's dorm by the desk and visiting with her and her friends, and decided it was time to invite her to go to Vespers. So I said, "Hey, let's go to Vespers." And she said, "Well, we'll see if you show up at Vespers." So we get there to Vespers, and sure enough, I'm there with my buddy, and she's there with her roommate. And she strategically makes sure that her roommate sits between me and her in the row there. Well, I was not to be deterred, and so I kept asking, kept pursuing, and I was, at that time, I was pre-med. She was determined never to date a pastor or a theology student, Her dad's a pastor, her uncle's a pastor, her grandpa was a pastor. Like, every guy in her family is a pastor, and she was done with pastor. And so I asked her out on a date. We went out on a date. Asked her out on another, and we went on another. And I decided, you know what, I want to kind of make this a little more efficient. So I planned it all out. Planned the whole thing out. By the way, when you give your life over to God and you accept Him, He begins to put awesome things in your life. He begins to pour light into your darkness. He told the disciples, if you will give yourself to me, I will reward you 1,000 times, 10,000 times in this life and the life to come. The moment you accept Jesus and begin to follow Him, even if you're not perfect at it, even if you're still making a mess out of your life, the moment you begin listening to God, He starts pouring His blessings and His love into your life. And He pours the light into your darkness. So I had it all planned out. We were going to go down to Holmes Lake. Any Union folks here tonight? Holmes Lake? All right. I've got some Union folks here. They had a dock down in one part of the lake, and I planned it all out. I was going to take her out on the dock, and in the romantic sunset of the evening, I was going to ask her to date. So we go down there, we drive down out there through the winding road and get down there past the little stargazing building that they had out there, and drove down to the dock and got out. And by the way, she wasn't wanting to date anybody at this point. And so we get down there on the dock, and she knew what was coming, but I asked her. I said, hey, I've been out on a couple dates. Let me make this official. She looked at me and she said, I'm not ready to date anyone. But here's yes for later. And I looked at her and I said, well then, here's for later. And I leaned down and gave her a kiss. just wait, it gets better. In that moment, as I leaned down and I kissed her, the sky lit up with lightning. I tell you, God pours light into your darkness. God orchestrates these things amazingly. The whole sky just cracked open with lightning. It flashed from one side to the other. And in that moment, and it even gets better than that. So she calls up her mom after this, and she talks to her mom, and she tells her the whole story. She's like, this guy's had a past, right? And she told her all about the partying and the getting kicked out of schools and everything else. And I mean, her dad's a pastor. Her mom's a pastor's wife. And in that moment, God performed another miracle. Her mom said, well, just forgive him. Give him a chance. Date him. God pours blessings into your life when you begin to turn towards Him. Actually, He does it even before. But when you turn towards Him, He begins pouring blessing after blessing into your life to let you know without a shadow of a doubt that your God is in love with you, and He wants to give you gift after gift after gift after gift. That's the way our God works. So, a year later, we're here working at MiVoden. I drag her out from Union College, bring her out of MiVoden. I'm extreme camp director. She's working up with the horses as a wrangler, and I decide I've got another question to ask. And so I go down to the shops in Coeur d'Alene and get a special little gift in a little box, and talk to the leaders up there at the wrangler station, and they said, yeah, you can have a couple horses, you can take them. So we headed off on a trail ride way out in the mountains. By the way, I had called her dad before this, and I was on the phone. I got Sarah, my co-extreme camp leader, and I asked her, okay, can you cover my kids? I've got to go make a phone call. I've got to call Wendy's dad. So I go down there, and I'm on the phone with her dad. I'm getting ready to ask him if I could ask his daughter to marry me. And here comes Richard Parker down the stairs. And he says, what are you doing? Where are your kids? Get off the phone and get back to your kids. Just to be fair to Richard, he had put up with me year after year after year. Like, if you remember the story from last night, I was in his office more than I was working the previous several years that I had worked at camp. So he had a long track record with me, knowing that I would skip out and do a lot of irresponsible stuff. And so I put down the phone for just a second. He said, Richard, I'm trying to ask my girlfriend's dad a serious question here. He was gracious and let me finish the phone call. So we head out in the mountains, and somewhere back there, I don't know where it was, but there was a huge meadow filled with daisies and Indian paintbrush, just littering the whole thing, and we get down off the horses. And I asked her to marry me. And she said yes! And she's here, sitting there in the back tonight. But I tell you that story to tell you this. My longest relationship before I met her was 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And now this year we've been married 23 years. 23 years. You see, God can take a messed up individual who's making terrible choices and going down the wrong path, and he can take you and he can transform you and he can turn you around. And he can pour his light and his love into your life. God can truly change you. Then I sprung it on her. I think God's calling me into ministry. She said, sure he is. But I still wasn't sure, and so I prayed. I said, God, I believe you've been speaking this to me, and this is what you want me to do. If you're going to do this, you're going to have to take this selfish soul, and you're going to have to give me a love for other people. I got assigned to a little church way out in the middle of Nebraska. And it was everything that I disliked about church. Like when you get up front to pray, half the church would kneel down, the other church would stand with you, right? All these just ridiculous debates going back and forth in the church. Everything that growing up, it kind of just grated on me, and the debates and things going on in the church about every particular little thing that had to be just a specific way. And I said, God, this church, if you really want me to be a pastor, you've got to help me fall in love with them. And within months, we just fell in love with the people of this church. Didn't agree with them on most everything, but fell in love with people of that little church. And he said, okay, God, it's yours. Please, 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 let me preach without being sick. Every Sabbath morning, I'd get up sick to my stomach when it was my turn to preach, and I had to get up. I'd lay there with my head on the table. Wendy said it would make her sick just watching me. I was just scared to death. And I would be there just with my head on the table, just nerves, I couldn't even think straight. And I'd go to church scared to death, and I'd get there, and I'd be sitting up front, and I couldn't sing, and I was a mess. And then I'd get up in the pulpit, and I'd go up to pray. I'd go up to preach, and I would stop, and I would pray. And in that moment when I would pray, just before I preached, all of a sudden God would lift the nerves, and he would just take them away. And I'd be able to preach for 20 minutes. I never could preach more than 20 minutes when I started out. So my daughter would have appreciated my sermons more back then, probably. 20-minute sermons, but for that 20-minute time frame, the nerves were gone. The moment I said amen at the end of the prayer, at the end of the sermon, the nerves came flooding back over. For 2.5 years, 2.5 years, the nerves were there. I said, God, please take this away. I'd heard horror stories of pastors retiring, still scared to death, nerves racking them when they would get up to preach. So when I got to seminary, I said, God, I'm going to take every single preaching class they offer here. And I'm asking you to take away those nerves. By the way, I had a 1.47 GPA when I got to Union. I think it was. Graduated at Union with a 3.75. I'm not sure if it was committing my life to God or getting married in the middle, but one of those two or a combination of those two turned things around. And at seminary, I had a 4.0 until I got to Dwight Nelson's class. And he gave me an A-. 1 A- the whole time. God will bless you when you commit your life to him. From being kicked out and flunking out of multiple colleges to 1 A- in seminary, God will truly step in and bless you if you will commit your life to him. I remember there standing up front preaching. Best preaching class, if any of you are interested in theology, you got to go to Andrews, and you got to take their black preaching course. I'm a white boy, I have no rhythm, I can't dance, I can't move, but in black preaching they teach you all sorts of amazing things. How to weave celebration into your sermons, and to put runs in your sermons, and all these things to weave the grace of God into the center of everything, and to bring people into an experience with God. And I'll never forget the moment when I was standing there, and I was preaching, and I was in the middle of a run. And the professors in the back of the class started jumping up and down and cheering with me, and he started praising God back and forth with me, and in that moment something clicked and something changed, and the nerves have never come back for preaching. See, when you commit your life to God, doesn't matter how far you've run, doesn't matter how dark your darkness is, God will turn you around, and he will place your feet on higher ground. He will put your feet on solid ground, and he will transform you, he will change you, and he will make you into a blessing. God loves you beyond anything you could ask or imagine. He came to save each one of you, and tonight Tonight I want to give you an invitation to accept that Jesus, that God, who saved this wretch and transformed my life, poured blessing after blessing into it. I want to give you an invitation to accept him into your hearts. And after the program tonight, especially all of you children here who haven't maybe had the opportunity to accept Jesus, there's going to be a special time for you to talk with your families. And as you talk with your families, I want you to ask Jesus into your hearts. And then talk with your parents about the next step. What do you do next? What do you next? Whether it's baptism, whether it's getting involved at church, whatever it is, talk with your parents. But accept Jesus into your life and get ready to enjoy the ride, because it's amazing.